and welcome to this special presentation on the creation of the VTX A-Series line array system from JBL. I'm Tom Kenny, co-editor of Mix Magazine, and I'm joined today by George Georgallis, who is the product manager, tour solution manager, a number of names he carries at the JBL facility, and he's joining us from the soundstage at the JBL Experience Center. Thank you for joining us, George.
Happy to be here, Tom.
And we also have Daniel Reed, front of house engineer, production manager. He's recently been credits with Avril Lavigne, Tom Morello, and most recently been out with the Kid Leroy. Thank you for joining us, Daniel.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
George, we're going to start with you. I had the good fortune to come down to the Northridge facility about 10 years ago with Dr. Sean Olive, Peter Chaikin, and the development of the M2 series. Fascinating. We read the story in Mix Magazine. It's a fascinating subject to watch how this sort of hardware and software comes together. I know these things take time, so that we may see a product come out, such as the A6 and the B15 sub in July. But we have at least 5 to 8 years of development by the time we reach A6. It started in 2017 with the introduction of the A12, and then in 2018, the introduction of the A8 and the B18 sub. George, when do you come on board, and what's your mandate here? What are they asking for?
Yeah, so I joined Harman about 9 years ago, and originally I joined the company as an applications engineer in the support team, and then a couple of years later, I got a role change where I went into product management. And essentially, product management, what really means is that me and my team get to look at the products that we have and then create a roadmap and specifications for future products to come. So we look at the market, we talk to our customers, hear the feedback, and then come up with a specification as to what these future generation products should be. And once we're done with that specification, then the next big task is to continue working with our engineering teams here in Northridge to develop the products. And then once they're developed, we're also responsible to get them into the market and introduce them to customers and eventually take the feedback on the new products.
So 2017 seems like a long time ago, and yet in your world, this probably seems like yesterday. The A12 came out. What were the goals? I mean, at this time in the sound reinforcement industry, we talk about lighter weight, greater power. What was sort of the mandate that you looked at and what you tried to achieve?
Yeah, so 2017 was when we released the product to the market. A12 was probably in development 2 to 3 years before that, so it was a long-term project for us. And with the A12, it was one of those all of the above kind of a tasks. We listened to the customers. We had some products in the market already, the Vertec line. So we went and talked to our customers, and we heard the feedback, and we wanted to address all of those different points that we got feedback on. But yeah, some of the key points were, of course, the sound quality, the output and power of the product, and then things like the packaging of the solution to improve the packaging and the efficiency and things like that.
Because we're talking about a system here at this point. You big, medium, small. You need all of them to work together. So we'll be talking about the scalability, the flexibility in a minute. But in the introduction of the line, there are many new technologies incorporated here. Let's start with the highs. I understand that 2423 is a new driver. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, correct. So if we look at sound systems and loudspeakers specifically, usually you have the compression driver that is responsible for, let's say, 1 kilohertz and above. And then usually below that, you have the mids, the lows, and the subs eventually. So you split that range in many different components. So if you look at the compression driver being responsible for the majority of the sound of the product, then it becomes one of the most critical aspects of the sound system. And most importantly, something that we wanted to address and change compared to some of the previous generation products, like the Vertec. So traditional compression drivers and product lines like the Vertec line that we have use metallic diaphragms. So traditional domes, some use 3-inch domes and some use 4-inch domes. And those domes are usually made out of a metallic diaphragm. It could be titanium or some other material. and those tend to have a sound to them. The material itself, when it breaks up and moves and to create the sound, it tends to embed the material sound into the content and the material. So for the A series, and this journey started with the original M2 that you just mentioned in the intro, and some of the original VTXs. The team here looked at the compression driver and rethought the whole process from the inside out, and came up with a new material for the diaphragm. I have one of those diaphragms over here. So this diaphragm is from the A6 specifically, and this diaphragm is not metallic and doesn't have the usual resonances and time domain problems that metallic diaphragms have, and that's what's in the heart of the A series drivers, and really what differentiates these products with the older generation products that we have.
I also understand. Talk to me about the phase plug and the waveguide. Then is this the development of a new waveguide as well, so that we're a single part? I understand.
Yeah. So one of the aspects is the diaphragm. So this is what really makes the sound. So this is, you could say, that's the most important aspect. But then there is what we get to do after the diaphragm, and how do we integrate the diaphragm and the compression driver into the system. So traditionally, compression drivers have a round exit. So this is an 1.5-inch exit. And usually you start with this piece, the diaphragm is inside of this, and then you have to go from this round exit to a flat wavefront at the end of the line array. So we get to put something in front of this exit to transform whatever comes out of this to an appropriate line array type wavefront. So this is a traditional compression driver. And then what we do with the A series, instead of developing a traditional compression driver, since we design and develop the components ourselves, we said, okay, is there a better solution to that? And this is what we came up with. So instead of having a traditional exit, we have a different type of an exit. So this exit is far more appropriate to go into a waveguide for line array use, and therefore it's much better and easier to control the wavefront and what exits the loudspeaker. So this is what the compression driver looks like for the A series products, and that's the exit. And then that feeds the waveguide, which is this piece over here, which is what exits into the horn. And then everything becomes just one assembly. So the compression driver and then the waveguide and the phase black is actually part of the same assembly and part of the design process, instead of looking at those problems independently and having different teams and designing them at different times.
Excellent. I mean, I remember some of that. Those compression drivers weigh a lot, if I remember correctly when I picked them up. They're sturdy and they're solid. What about the mids? I have this term RBI, rotation boundary integrator. Could you explain some of that to me, George? What happens with those 4 or 5 inches in the middle?
Yeah, so the RBI is another JBL technology that allows us to place different transducers on horns. So traditionally you have a horn for the high frequency section, and then you have to have some space or find some space to place the mids and then place the woofers. And the spacing between those components can have a huge impact to the directivity of the system, potentially the packaging, the size of the system, and things like that. So ideally, in most cases, you want to keep them as close to each other as possible so they sound correctly. And at the same time, you also have to have a really good horn for the high frequency section, so that behaves the way it should. And then at the same time, keep the packaging and the power handling and everything else in mind. So RBI is a technology that we have, which allows us to take a mid-frequency driver or a low-frequency driver in some cases and place it on the side of the horn instead of in its own horn or in its own location, and then integrate that through some DSP in the background with the high frequency, and make sure those sound correctly, they're at the correct spacing, and then make the packaging as small as possible, and also increase the transducer density as high as possible as well. So the long story short, the RBI is what allows us to put mid-frequency drivers or low-frequency drivers onto horns and make them work correctly and sound correctly with the horn and then the high-frequency driver behind the horn.
What are the advantages you find of that? I mean, does this manifest itself in clarity or?
Yeah. So one of the big ones is coverage, because that allows us to get the transducers much closer to each other. Usually, especially for mid drivers, the further apart you get them, the narrower they get. So sometimes it's kind of hard to match the directivity of the high frequencies and the mid frequencies together. So placing the mid frequency drivers on the horn allows us to optimize the spacing between the mids. So directivity is a direct benefit for the RBI. Packaging is a big one because we can use less space essentially for the same amount of transducers. And then there's some other acoustic benefits from the loading of the transducers and things like that by placing them on the horns and having phasing plaques in front of them.
Gotcha. Let's go to the lows then. We're the fourth generation of another JBL technology, the differential drive. Can you talk to us about that and how it's incorporated into the A series?
Yeah, so differential drive is another transducer technology by JBL. And really what that is a technology that uses dual voice calls inside the woofer. So usually woofers have a single voice call inside. And differential drive is technology that allows us to use two voice calls. So a 3-inch woofer will have two 3-inch voice calls instead of just one. There are a lot of benefits to differential drives. One of the most obvious ones is the power handling for the transducers. So if you have double the voice coil area, usually that means doubling the power handling. Or another way to look at that is that much less power compression. So usually the worst enemy of these transducers, especially woofers, is the heat. And as you have the voice coils and the parts heating up, that tends to change the response of the system, and which means you can have different characteristics as you push these systems to different levels. Differential drive has many benefits. One of the main ones being that it has much better power handling and therefore much lower power compression and staying together and staying consistent across different use levels.
Also, lower heat and lower all types of benefits come out of that. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And another big one for differential drive is packaging. Usually, for these transducers, because of the way they're arranged, we get to put the neodymium magnets inside the voice coil, not outside of the voice coil, and we get to use an aluminum frame on the outside, and that also gives us some weight advantages. So we can be much lighter for the same output. For a given woofer, which translates to less weight for the sound system, essentially.
Which is a big concern, and we'll get to that in a minute, especially from somebody in Daniel's position, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You came out with a B18 sub, a single 18-incher in 2018, and with the release of the A6 in late July, you brought out the B15. Also part of a family. I understand they can be flown or ground stacked, two versions, correct?
Right.
What can you tell us about this sub, and what do you like about it?
Yeah, so A series is the array series. So the line arrays, B series for us are the base units. So that's where we place all of our subwoofer options for the line. B18 was the one that came up with the A8, and it's mechanically compatible with the A8, so you can suspend it above A8, you can ground stack A8s on top. And then B15 is the equivalent of that for the A6 system, so mechanically compatible with the A6. And we also have a B28, which is our largest one of the subwoofers in the B series. And then these are all designed to have the same phase response across the line and the same crossover points and things like that. So you can use them interchangeably and as you like. So you can pick any one of the taps and use them with any one of the subs without anything special, and everything sums correctly and works correctly together. All of these subwoofers use differential drive, so they all, like the 18s, use a new 18-inch woofer we developed specifically for them that uses dual 4-inch voice coils instead of 3-inch that we use for the tops. And then the B15 also, so a new 15-inch woofer based on those technologies developed specifically for that product.
Excellent. Certainly, these components all come together both within a single unit,
right,
and within the entire system. Daniel, I'd like to bring you in now if we could, because this sense of scalability is very important in today's both in the touring and the installation world. You've mixed on the A12 and the A8. You're about to mix on the A6 coming up, I understand. So where does this A6 fit in for yourself as a front of house mixer? Let's put that hat on first, and later we'll come to production manager. Where do you see this A6 being employed in a scalable system?
Yeah, it seems like it's an extremely versatile product given the size and its scalability. So for my general purposes, it would be seen in a place more in use for something like a front fill, something to cover those gaps where the main array isn't able to cover, mostly in that closer middle section where the audience is closest to the barricade. The thing that stands out initially for me would be something in that type of deployment, whether it's one or two, possibly three stacked on top of the subs, or some sort of case at the front of the stage. With something like 120-degree coverage, it's going to fill all those gaps in between those mains, just so that my mix is going to be able to translate everywhere we go, whether you're on the side of the building and the very front or towards the back. The idea is that a box that size, while it might not be exactly the same as maybe the A8 or the A12, it's going to be voiced and similar in a way to where my mix is not going to be drastically different in the middle up close, as opposed to where, further in the throw of the mains. And then also, many times we find ourselves doing smaller clubs. We end up doing corporate events, types of smaller promotional shows, or if I'm just working for a client that isn't doing as large of venues, it seems like it'd be a perfect club install PA. Especially with the ability to be versatile in the sense of flying subs above it, or be able to ground stack, do a variety of deployments.
You mentioned voicing and everything, Jason. Dana, one of the most important things is you're in different venues every night when you're out on the road, right? And you don't have a lot of time. Does that sense of sort of system-wide reliability must matter, right?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things, maybe George could even speak to this, is that, with with the older JBL products like Vertec, there was different amplifiers amplifying all sorts of different boxes. There's people teching them in a million different ways. And so the PA wasn't as consistent from show to show. JBL certainly has tonality that kind of is recognizable, which every manufacturer tries to kind of do their own thing with, but it wasn't as consistent from box to box, from show to show. So in terms of the A series, it's like night and day, because it's all built in to be consistent and have the same tonal qualities regardless of what the system is. You can tell it's going to have the same nuances regardless of where it's deployed, and then it's just going to be a matter of doing a little bit of systems engineering or maybe acoustic treatment to the space that it's deployed in. And those are all the things that, get a little bit more above my head at times.
Well, George, can you follow up on that then, George? Because that sort of consistency throughout the line must be crucial on the road.
Yeah, so we address the consistency with in two ways. So one is VTXs are now systems, so we sell them with the Crown amplifiers. We develop the software for them. We also make all of the accessories. So that consistency aspect, especially compared to Vertec, got a lot better by us saying this is a system. These are the amplifiers that goes with it. So everywhere you rent or you run into a VTX system globally, it's going to be with the same amplifiers, same software, and everything else. And then the consistency across the product lines, this really comes down to the compression drivers and technology and the transducers. We use the same compression driver across the line, which again, it really gives the system its voicing, the compression driver. So that allows all these different systems, the A-series systems, to really have the same character and the same characteristic high frequency response, and make them very, very easy to go from one to the other, mix them, and very recognizable.
Help me out. What does voice, for our audience, what does voicing the system mean? Could you help me out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's probably a few different explanations. Sometimes this is just the balance, the overall balance between the lows and the highs of the system. So usually systems have a tendency to have more LF than HF. At what point you depart to make that transition is one of the things that usually gets associated with voicing, but I think in many ways it goes a lot lower than that. When you have low distortion or different characteristics in your transducers, that contributes to voicing. So sometimes when a system is not aggressive sounding and it's linear and responds very well, that usually tends to be referred to as the voicing of the system, which usually people refer to voicing as a frequency response problem or solution, but in many ways that goes lower and down to the transducer level and the design decisions into the speakers.
Let's talk a minute about clarity, if we could. Daniel, let's start with you, because one of the early things we started hearing back mixes is sort of low-end clarity, which certainly interior venues and in festival situations matters matters quite a bit for a mixer. Can you talk to me about the low end, Daniel?
Absolutely. It's huge. It's something that's become a requirement for the majority of live shows to have really powerful and cohesive low end that doesn't have gaps, that develops in a way that's not going to be, flubby or feeling like there's noise cancellation in the audience. And so much of the music that's popular these days is big, loud, full of low end, full of big bass, 808 drops, things that the audience really wants to not only hear, but they want to feel it when it hits them in their chest. And there's an art to layering that in a way that's not just going to be punishment, essentially, And one thing that is huge for me with the artist I'm currently with, who's a pop artist who has a lot of hip hop influenced songs, is to be able to have those low 808 bass drops really punch hard and not interfere with the clarity of the top end, and more so work in concurrency with the mid frequencies and the higher frequencies, and also to be able to disperse those frequencies in a wider, more uniform pattern that's going to cover an audience, no matter whether it's a festival where it's going to be maybe a wider one, where you might have to consider doing things like, maybe delaying out some of your outer subs to kind of widen out your throw of your subs, or to maybe fly them up to allow that clarity to kind of stay consistent no matter where you are in the venue, whether it's an arena or something where the crowd sort of starts to go up higher than just the floor. So, I mean, that low end is it's pretty crucial. And one of the best things about, the A series and the B series stuff is that's really what it is. It's clarity. You hear things in your mix in the top end that you don't normally hear through other boxes. You find out, if you have an artist with certain backing tracks, you're like, oh, I never heard that little nuance to it. Those are things that you always hear when you're listening through the A series stuff. And then in terms of the B series stuff, it's just straight clear power with no distortion or flubbiness. And then so as a front of house mixer going into variety of venues and festivals and various scales of format, it's crucial. And it's something that's, when you see it, when you walk in the room with an A series with the B series subs, you're not going to have to worry about whether or not you have enough power and clarity, because it's always going to be there.
The other word that comes up quite a bit is directivity. So George, could you address that? Sort of what that means in terms of the system-wide approach?
Yeah, directivity really comes down to the projection of the system. So each one of the systems, they have a stated coverage. So, for example, the A12 is a 90-degree system. So it means we're projecting at a 90-degree pattern. And then what we really want to see is that everywhere within that 90-degree cone or that 90-degree coverage pattern, the system really sounds the same. So if you are 30 degrees off axis or on axis or anywhere in that range, we want to have the exact same sound signature and frequency response in that range. So that's one aspect of directivity within that stated coverage, to be as consistent as possible tonally and have the same experience in there. And then the other aspect of directivity is the stuff that comes out of the speaker outside of that 90-degree area. So things that they're projecting behind the system or to the sides or above and below. So all those things are critical for the experience and directivity, but it's also contributing to the clarity and how the system behaves in a room and how it's energizing the room and things like that.
Excellent. Let's move on to packaging, because this was a crucial part in integrating the design across the line. I understand gas prices are high, power costs. It costs a lot to put a truck out on the road. So what was the intent, George, and the feedback from the beginning in terms of dealing with the production manager side of Daniel's operation? So can you tell me a bit about the materials used and seeking that lightweight, high power ratio?
Yeah, I mean, from the packaging point of view, in touring and when things have to go in trucks, the sizing always matters, and make them in blocks that make sense for international truck sizes. So it's easy to say when you want more LF, you want a speaker bigger, but at the same time, there's limits to how big things can get and how much they need to weight. So when we talk about packaging, we are talking about looking at the system from how it gets into tracks, how you transport that, where it goes, and things like that, and making sure we're designing around those critical constraints instead of giving us a limitless size or weight possibilities to achieve XYZ performance metrics. Then the other aspect of packaging is to be efficient. So we go 4 high on carts. We have some accessories and some things that we can place on top of the speakers, so you can stack more things on top of them. So they're very efficient instead of packing and tracking. But also the packaging really also comes down to the accessories and the number of different things you can do with the same stuff. So you can have a track full of the same products, and then with different accessories, you can deploy them in different situations without having to have a unique system or a unique solution for those situations. And then lastly, it's about looking at all those things across the product line. So the packaging of X system is the same as the other system. So crews and everyone learning how to use the big system, for example, automatically know how to use the A8 and the A6. So that packaging and that experience is identical across all of the systems.
And what about rigging? I mean, I understand that there's rigging points and stuff. You've made this particularly easy and solid and reliable. I mean,
Yeah.
can you talk to me about the rigging mechanism?
Yeah, the rigging was definitely one of the highlights of the A12 and now the A8 and the A6. It was developed from the ground up, specifically from a lot of input and feedback we got from customers. So the A12 rigging is very accurate and it holds the correct positions and everything else, but it's also extremely easy to use. There is an auto-locking mechanism internally that fixes the angles for you. So once you select a position and you suspend the system, the auto-locking mechanism secures the position to the selected angle. But it's also extremely obvious to use, which is actually a big requirement these days. Very rarely on tours, the touring crew gets to fly the systems. So usually you have a new crew every time. So having a rigging that's extremely easy to explain to local crew and say, this is how it's going to go up, you tell them once, and that's very obvious, is very critical. So not only it's strong, it's accurate, it's safe, but it's also very, very easy to understand, and it takes no more than a few minutes to explain to someone how to suspend the system.
George develops that. Daniel, you put it in use. How's it working out for you?
I mean, it's easy. That's exactly what he's getting at, is that it's about making the crew and the whole entire production's time that we're spending as efficient as possible. And in addition to the truck pack aspect of it and getting on and off the truck easily and having it be uniform and scalable in a way that's conducive for a variety of levels of touring, that time that you're saving on things like teaching the local crew who's going to help you fly the PA, or when you're standing on one side of the PA and pinning those angles and teaching the other person on the other side. I mean, that's valuable time. That's that much quicker you're going to get to be done with loadout and move on to the next one, and instead of spending sometimes hours, it seems like, teaching people just to get the first four boxes up in the air. So it's crucial. And from that standpoint of just time management and efficiency, because every single show, there's time, there's budget, there's a schedule that we have to stick to, and little things like that can be such a pain in the butt to deal with on a show when it's something that seems as minute as pinning the rigging points on the bar on the top of the PA, things like that. Sometimes those can take hours, depending on the type of PA you're using and the local crew that maybe doesn't have as much experience with that kind of thing. So having that ease of use it's really important in today's modern touring, and just basically installing anything in terms of audio these days, you have to make it efficient. And the same thing with the pinning aspect of it. When it just you set those angles before it goes up in the air, that's saving you a lot of stress of having to get it up in the air and then go and push things up in the air and get tension off the box and things like that. It just makes the whole entire experience from a technician standpoint a lot more effective and easier to
And,
deal with.
and let's face it, in the last couple of years, crews have gotten smaller, and the very people come in and out lately, based on coming back from the pandemic and such. George, but it's not just Daniel you need to address; it's the rental houses, your customers, in a sense. What were they asking for back when you started this project, and how do you think you delivered to them? I mean, what were the key points that the rental houses were asking for?
Yeah, from the rental house point of view, I think there's two sides of that. One is the speaker and the technology and the accessories and the packaging, which we have addressed. But then the other side of that is the demand for the system. So we often, depending on the category, a lot of the systems get specified from the engineers. So a lot of the focus for my team and the company in general was to get a lot more engineers in front of the systems, get to use them, and also therefore get to request them a lot more, which would make sense business-wise for the rental companies. So we put a lot of effort into creating the good product, but then we put a lot of effort into actually getting a lot of engineers in front of it, getting feedback from engineers, addressing the engineers' needs, both from the sound point of view and everything else, and therefore also creating demand for the systems and having them more riders and things like that. So that was probably a huge area of focus for the company as well, to make sure that we're on the right riders. And when we say VTX and A series, people are familiar with what this is, what it is for JBL, and what the products are.
The best sale is come out and hear it. That's the best sale you have there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, listen, we're getting close to the time. Is there anything else you'd like to address, George? Dana, let's start with you, George, if you would. I mean, what are we missing here that is a huge advantage to bringing a scalable A series in line?
No, from the product point of view, the A6 brought yet another category and size to us, so we're completing the family as we go along. And I think for us in the coming year in 2023, it's going to be all about completing and finalizing the rest of the pieces that goes around the system. So specifically for 2023, we're going to focus a lot of our effort on software and have some really good announcements and releases related to software.
Can't do without software these days.
Exactly.
Daniel, what excites you coming up about when you get your hands on this and go on the road with it in 2023?
I'm just excited to have new toys to play with and learn more on new gear. That's always one of the fun parts about any new product release, is being able to be on the forefront of that knowledge base and experience. It's in my line of work, there's a lot of us out there, but the circles become smaller and smaller between the different artists and their engineers that they work with, and the touring crews that are out there. We all tend to talk a lot, and it's always really exciting when a new product like this comes out. And just to be able to be, at the forefront of that is exciting. And JBL is right there, just really setting themselves apart from the pack with consistently putting out new products that are just adding more and more value to the level of the show that's happening, and being able to go from something that's whether it's in a small club or a worship house to the largest stadiums and festivals in the world. It's just consistent. So I'm just excited to see how it works out, and the variety of show deployments that I'll be doing next year. So
it's not just that when a new product comes out it's exciting, but when it sounds great, it's even more exciting. Right? That's always the goal. Well, I want to thank you, gentlemen. In 2022, JBL completed maybe completed the 12, the 8, the A6 now, 2 subs. Looking to get it out on the road in 2023. Anyway, thank you, George. And thank you for putting out the product. And thank you for joining us. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for joining us. And I know you're back on the road tomorrow. And thank you, audience, for joining us. Go listen to a JBL A-Series system. All right. Thank you.